Hello, thank you for joining us for our webinar on the Payara Roadmap for 2019. And we've got Arjan Tijms and Steve Millidge who are going to be going through the roadmap. Please feel free to ask any questions in the question box, and I will try and interject where I can if it needs to be sort of asked then. But we'll also have a question period at the end of the presentation, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, so we can have questions then as well. So feel free to save them as well. And I think with that, we'll probably get started now. So Steve, as soon as you're ready, if you're able to take it away.
Sure. So basically, I'm going to take you through the roadmap for Payara Platform for 2019. And what I'm going to do is basically going to take a look at what we delivered last year. So some of the highlights of 2018, which you may not know about or you may know about. I'll then go through a roadmap for major releases, as there's some things happening around Payara 4 as well at this timeline. I'll then cover the 2019 themes, and then I'll pass over to Arjan, who's going to go through the detail about Jakarta EE and MicroProfile, where they are and what our plans are related to those. Arjan will also cover JDK 11 and some developer tooling as well. And finally, we'll have a detailed roadmap where he'll go through each quarterly release in 2019 and tell you, what we're planning to put on that release. Obviously, like any software, what we plan may not be what we deliver, so they may get moved about, dates might move, but in general, this is our focus areas for 2019. And then, as Jaden said, we'll have 15 minutes for questions at the end. Okay, so 2018 was a big year for Payara. We released Payara Platform 5. This is really at the beginning of 2018 with the 18.1 release. And Payara 5 was a major up-rev of our support for Java EE applications. So Payara 5 brought in support for Java E8 applications. But we also changed the look and feel of the console, but we also made major changes to how clustering and deployment worked within the Payara platform. So we split the concepts of deployment and clustering apart and created what's called a data grid, which is so in a domain now in Payara Platform 5, a whole domain is one single data grid, and web session data and high availability data is shared across that. And we brought in the concept of deployment groups independent of that, which is groups of servers that you would want your application or resources to run on. So Payara Platform 5 was a major API upgrade, but also putting in places flexibility around clustering and deployment, really targeting cloud and container environments. So the other major thing we did in 2018, and this became quite a big focus for us, was MicroProfile support. MicroProfile as a project started taking off. A lot of APIs being released, and the team in Payara, where our focus is to keep that up to date and keep Payara and Payara Server and Payara Micro up to date with all the MicroProfile APIs that are happening. So within 2018, we released MicroProfile 2.0 support, and basically built that ourselves and built it deeply into our application server and our platform. I mean, the benefit of having an application server is that when you have APIs like this, we can embed them within the runtime so that it gives a developer more integration. For example, our config API is integrated heavily with the administration console, and you can set configs at various levels within your configuration. And similarly, open tracing is heavily integrated with our request tracing to give you metrics and spans that tell you what's happening within the server itself. A third big focus was containers. So as we'll see in a later slide, one of our customers tell us a lot that container support is something that you really need. So we did quite a lot of work on integration with Kubernetes. The domain data grid that I mentioned earlier has modes that will work in Kubernetes from 2018. It has both a Kubernetes service discovery mode, and it has DNS mode for other type cloud environments, in container environments. And we also did work to integrate with Kubernetes config maps, to integrate with MicroProfile config and allow you to replace variables in deployment units like data source usernames, passwords, URLs, etc., with config maps defined in Kubernetes. So that's an area that we know people want us to work on, and we've got more planned in the roadmap around that. Another big thing was obviously cloud. One of the big drivers to do the data grid was to enable clustering to occur out of the box on cloud platforms. Previously, Payara clustering was delivered through a library called Shoal. Then we moved that to Hazelcast in our early releases, but that was multicast based for its discovery. So we built a domain data grid so that it would use TCP/IP and use knowledge of the domain itself to discover all the nodes. And that means that when you install a DAS and a domain on typical cloud environments, that they should all find each other, cluster together without any problems, straight out the box without any complex configuration. So one of the key reasons, obviously, to do that was to focus on building out Payara on infrastructure as a service. We've also done work on Payara Micro to make sure that it can work well in both the container environments and cloud, and also cloud itself. So we've done some work around Azure and making Payara Micro work in Azure container services and Azure app services as well. And then general work that we do all the time is we always focused on performance. So obviously we want Payara to be the fastest application server out there. We've done a lot of work, and we're always continually doing work to drive performance out of Payara. And we've done a lot of work in the last release around deployment performance for large deployments. So you should see significant increases there. And obviously we're always working on scalability, and then we've put visibility. So visibility is basically instrumentation of the application server itself. One of the advantages of obviously an app server is it's a managed runtime for you, and therefore we want to instrument as much as is going on within the server itself, and then surface that to you as a developer or ops manager or ops person to actually see what the application server is doing and your application is doing on the application server itself. And again, we've got more on the roadmap for 2019. 2018, we built a lot of capabilities like request tracing and SQL logging and those areas. And in 2019, we want to make those more visible. Currently, they tend to come out on console and command line. So that was 2018. This is our major release roadmap. We have currently, obviously, two major releases, Payara Server 4, which is still available to customers. That stopped in community in first start of 2018. And now Payara Server 4 for customers goes into maintenance mode, and I'll have a slide about what that means. But Payara Server 4 is still supported out into 2025. And within that, we also provide JDK support for JDK 8 for Payara Server 4 users out into 2025. Payara Server 5 also has a 10-year lifecycle. It was released in 2018, so it will end its extended support in 2028, and Payara Server 5 has full support out to 2023. One of the things we've also decided is that the release date for Payara Platform 6, we've planned for 2021. So what we're going to do is every 3 years, we're going to do a major revision of Payara Server or Payara Micro. So basically the whole platform will be changed in every 3 years. And that gives us opportunities to rethink the architecture of the platform and modernize it. And I've got a slide about things that we're thinking about for Platform 6 in 2021. So Payara 4 is going into maintenance with the release of 19.1. So what that means for customers is that essentially the feature stream, which is one of the streams that customers get over and above the open source, that stops. And what we do is we maintain the stability stream. So stability stream is another customer-only stream where you get monthly bug fixes and patches and security fixes. That continues from the beginning of the year, and that will continue, right through to 2024. JDK8 support, so Payara 4 is going to remain on JDK8, and customers get support for JDK8 through our partnership with Azul to run on Azul Zulu Enterprise. 4 will still get backported fixes. Hot fixes are still available to customers on demand, and we'll still sort of upgrade and ensure that Payara 4 works with the latest platforms. So that's operating systems, databases, those things. And there'll still be some small component upgrades. And then if customers want, new features in 4, they'll be sort of customer demand driven. So if you need small changes, then we'll still do those on demand. So that's 4. If we look at 2021 and what we're planning for Platform 6, so just jumping ahead. So our goal for Platform 6 is essentially to strip the whole server down and then build it back up again. So what we mean by that is Payara is a very modular server. It is built on a HK2 kernel. So what we're going to do is take all the services apart as they currently are and then build them back up, looking at where optimizations can be made, where we can make use of Java modularity, and where we can consolidate maybe services that we have multiple versions of into a single new service written with the latest JDK 11 or whatever JVM features. So we'll take basically old code, strip it back down, bring it back up again using the modern models and modern ways of coding. We'll be looking to build a new administration console. The current one is quite old technology, and we're very sensitive, obviously, that administration console is one of the best features of Payara against its competition, and we'll need to make it so that the UX experience is just as good or better than it is currently. So less clicks rather than more clicks to do the same thing. We're also looking at taking our kernel and making that a full CDI implementation, so we're not as dependent on JBoss Weld. So there's currently only a couple of CDI implementations, and we think, given MicroProfile and the way Jakarta EE is heading, that having an HK2 as a CDI implementation that's sort of fully under our control and understanding, that will help us to deliver higher performance within the server going forward. So that's one of our strategic goals. Obviously, we're looking at Jakarta EE certification, which we'll come to. And we're also looking to build extensive monitoring. We want, the whole point of a managed runtime is that you can concentrate on your applications, and the runtime itself can give you, extensive services and visibility of what's happening within your applications. So we want to build for Payara 6, and you'll see for Payara 5 some detailed and advanced capabilities in that area. We will building Platform 6 on JDK 11. What we mean by that is you'll see a slide on JDK 11 support, but what we mean for Platform 6 is that it will be completely compiled and built using JDK 11. So many things that run on JDK 11 aren't actually built and compiled on JDK 11. So our intention is to build the whole of Payara and all its dependencies on compiled against JDK 11 or whatever the latest is at that point in time for version 6. So therefore, it'll no longer support, may not support applications compiled against 8. We want to obviously be standards-based. We'll build in more support for MicroProfile, and we're also investigating building, native Spring support within the application server itself. Currently, obviously, you can run happily Spring applications, but we'll still run them as first-class citizens within Payara Platform 6. So we did a survey of our customers, and these are the top things that came out. Performance and scalability is number 1. Obviously, the same for everybody normally. Docker was the other big one, hence we're focusing on Docker, as you'll see. And then we had a lot of demand for developer features. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the fourth thing was monitoring. So you'll see that we're trying to address all these, the top of these demands within our roadmap. So our themes for 2019, we always focus on performance. You won't see it in the roadmap, but it's something that we're doing all the time. We are conscious, that we want to be smaller, faster, simpler. So we are focusing on that. We do more cloud integration. So we're looking to build deep integration with cloud. So that's not just running on different clouds, but actually supporting a lot of the services that they provide. So integrating with their monitoring infrastructure, integrating with their security structure. So you may see, specific versions optimized for specific cloud platforms. There's a lot of standardization on Docker and Kubernetes. So again, further work is happening in 2019 on integration with those container architectures. And we will continue the standard support, which Arjan will talk about around Jakarta EE and MicroProfile. And then finally, we're doing quite a bit of work on developer tooling. So, we want Payara to be simple to use, easy to use, work with all the standard developer tool chains. And if anyone's got any enhancements or issues or requests that they'd like to have improvements in there, if you just raise them on GitHub, we look at enhancement requests on GitHub as well. So passing over to Arjan, he's going to go a bit more in detail around each one of these bullet points and put them into a roadmap as well. Okay.
Right. Okay, so let me go full screen on this one. All right, so the last couple of months, we have been working quite a bit on the Glassfish 5.1 release for Jakarta EE. But this was quite an important release, as it's meant that all the transfers of all the projects from Java EE, from Oracle's Java EE repo to Eclipse have been completed, they have been tested, they have been proven to work. It's basically the same Glassfish as Glassfish 5.0. The only difference is in the licensing. So that sounds like a small job, but it actually was a lot of work. All the source code had to be vetted, had to be cleaned up, had to be buildable on the Eclipse infrastructure. So this took quite a long time, approximately a year in total. Lots of small things were discovered, copyrights had to be chased and what have you. So that one is done now, so that's really good. Going forward, there's going to be a Jakarta EE 8 release. Jakarta EE 8 again will be the same specification, the same set of specifications as Java EE 8 is. The main difference will be again in the licensing and in the process. So it will be completely under the control of Eclipse. The specs itself, as I mentioned, the APIs, everything will be the same, but it will be licensed, it will be IP handled by Eclipse. So this is still in progress. It's not that easy. Some people are hard to find. Some companies have to be asked for permission. So this is all still in progress. So we're hoping to finish this up quite soon, but it's still not done. But as soon as it is done, Payara 5 will be, we will try to certify against it, and we have good faith that we will. This means that if we're going to run the entire TCK against Payara, that is the full CTS platform, including all the individual TCKs for all the dependent specs. So this is quite a big thing. It probably means we have to fix some things left and right. It probably wouldn't be just running it and checking a box, we're certified, done. But it might entail some work, so we're planning to do that. And after that, it's when finally we can start the next phase, which will be Jakarta EE 9. Jakarta EE9 would be the first real new development. So all the other things are about transferring, about relicensing, about open sourcing things that weren't open source before, like the TCK. Jakarta EE9 will be an entire new thing, running under the new Eclipse Foundation spec process, the EFSP. And it will include both the existing specs and the new specs. So there's several new ones planned. There's one, there's no sequel for Java EE, or for Jakarta EE, sorry. That's at the moment being prepared as a new spec. Other specs are being updated. Some of the work indeed has already started. So even though we can't release it yet, commits have been done, work has been put in. For instance, JSF, we have been cleaning that a lot. So JSF is quite an old spec. It goes back to approximately 2003. It has accumulated a lot of craft over the years. Various things have been split out from it to other specs. So basically the expression language has been extracted to a separate spec. Things like the managed bean system, CDI was partially based on that. So there's no need anymore for its own managed bean system. So all those things are going to be removed, meaning JSF would be a lot leaner and smaller going forward. And one of the extra features that we plan, and we have a prototype for that already, is a more MVC push model. So this would make JSF more of a hybrid thing. It's already not a pure MVC pool, which it was before, but it's a hybrid thing already. It will become more of a hybrid MVC web framework. The same thing goes for security. We have a lot of things planned for that. Some things have been done already. I won't go into full detail of everything, but one of the things we have been planning and have sort of a prototype for is authorization rules. So authorization rules is going to be a big thing in security, meaning instead of just a simple role check that you can do today, like is a user in role foo, is a user in role admin, you can actually check whether the user is in a role that's valid in certain business hours, so say from 9 to 5 or from 9 to 5 excluding holidays, what have you. So the entire authorization system would be a bit more programmatic. It would be a bit more flexible. There's a lot of new things for MicroProfile planned as well. So MicroProfile compared to Jakarta EE is kind of like an extension set of APIs. They go quite hand to hand, although MicroProfile can be implemented separately, largely without Jakarta EE. In practice, it's a bit of an extension of it. There's the same people behind it. There's the same philosophy. There's the same energy behind the two projects. The MicroProfile intends to move faster. It tends to break things easier. While Jakarta EE is more thorough, is more conservative for change. Some of the projects actually overlap. So you see for the additional projects on this list, there's concurrency. Of course, there's concurrency in Jakarta EE as well. And those two do overlap, meaning that the additions being handled, being considered for Jakarta EE are already being done in MicroProfile. The idea is that eventually those will flow back to Jakarta EE. We still have to see how to do that exactly, so we're not 100% sure. But they're not competing. One is more like ahead of the curve and the other is more conservative. All right, going to the next slide. At Payara, we're not just looking at the main server, but at the ecosystem in which the server functions as well. So that's basically two things. One thing is the toolings that you use with Payara. The other one is to connect Payara to the outside world. So I'm talking a little bit about the tooling that you use for Payara. Two of the main plugins that we have for IDEs are the Eclipse plugin and the NetBeans one. And for the next release, we have a couple of features planned. Most of them have already been done. So this will be released pretty soon from now. We'll not go through all of them, but some of the highlights are that we're now compatible with the latest Eclipse and Payara releases. So that's quite important. We had a nasty bug where if you had a space in your path, the server wouldn't start via Eclipse, so that's fixed. And there's like a lot of usability features. So you can view the config files within your IDE. You can jump between projects. You can jump from the deployed project to the source project and what have you. And there's quite a bit more coming for Killian, Maeve, and Cradle. And next to this, not mentioned on the slide, we have those projects where we connect to other things, which is the cloud connectors and the security connectors. So we intend to improve some of them a bit as well, specifically the security connectors. Okay, moving to the next slide, so the JDK plans. So we do have a lot of plans for that as well. Specific to mention is that Payara Platform 4 will remain on JDK 8. So it's still fully supported. There's the SL Enterprise JDK subscription. And maybe one of the important things that people are looking forward to is the support for JDK 11. So we're currently hard at work. It's not that easy, but we're making good progress. So we have an alpha build at the moment where basically a lot of things run. So the server starts up, it runs applications. There's a few failures here and there. So we have an extensive test suite based on internal testing, based on Java EE samples, based on MicroProfile samples and all the TCKs around that. So a lot of them do run now on JDK 11, and there are just a few failures. I think on top of my head of around 200 odd tests, there's 5 that fail still. So we're not quite there yet, but it's pretty close now. And as Steve mentioned already, the Payara Platform 6 will be completely built on JDK 11. So that means that it's not just that the server runs on it, it can be compiled with it. And all the dependencies will be compiled with JDK 11 as well. Meaning that those which aren't readily available in the JDK 11 format will be compiled by Payara. So that's still a lot of work ahead for us. Okay, so what's coming in the new version? That's pretty soon now. One of the things I will mention is a new alternative EGB remoting. And this essentially means that there's going to be a very lightweight EGB remote client. So for those of you who have used remote EGB in the past, and specifically the Glassfish or Payara version, the client lib is quite invasive, so it puts a lot of classes on the class path. It's really big. It's like 120 megabytes or so for a client lib, which is essentially the entire server on the client. So that's a bit over the top. The networking protocol is quite difficult to use with the Docker, to use on the cloud, because it does need a lot of ports to be open. It needs connections back from the server to the client. The client needs to be available and have open ports. So that's all quite difficult to use in a cloud environment. A new alternative EGB remoting technology will basically be REST-based under the hood. So from the point of the client, you would use the same type save classes. You would request them from the NDI as you would always have done. The difference is that under the hood, it would use REST. It's initially not completely compatible with remote EGB, so it will be the same model, the same approach, but not all features will work. In the coming months, we'll try to improve on those, and we will add more specific EGB features. Okay, going forward into the second release, the supported running on JDK 11 will be a big thing. As we mentioned, we're quite far at the moment, but not quite there. For the next release, we do hope to be there. It's still a bit of work, and we'll probably do a tech release before that, so people can try it. It won't be fully supported, but before that, you can just play with everything. Okay, going forward. So as mentioned before, Jakarta EE compatible is a big item on the list. So this will mean that we have to run the entire TCK for Jakarta EE. This thing is quite big. It's like literally thousands of tests. In some cases, it can run like for several days. So it's quite an extensive thing to run. There's some obscure things that might fail, that actually do fail. So we have to fix those things. And this will be a big step, of course. All right, the monitoring console, it kind of means that we have like multiple things to monitor the server. And we will basically unite them in one location, so we can monitor a lot of stuff from one place. Okay, approaching the end of the year. One of the things we're going to look at is a legacy-free profile. So at the moment, Glassfish and thus Payara has been quite heavily focused on backwards compatibility. Glassfish being the reference implementation for a long time, it meant that even the things were pruned from Java EE, they were still supported in Glassfish, since you would have to have an example for that, since they weren't completely removed, but just like optional technologies, meaning that the reference implementation, they did have to support it. So we're going to have a separate profile that will remove all those things. This will basically means things like the home interfaces of EGB, JSP support in JSF, so not JSP support in general, but just for JSF, JSR77 and 88, which is the old deployment API. Those things are all going to be removed from that profile. People who want to use them can still have them in the full profile, but the legacy-free profile will be, hence the name, free of the legacy. All right, and I think we're at the questions then now.
Yes, so please feel free to ask any questions, guys. We have a few minutes. I no current questions at the minute. I'll give you a minute or two. Oh. We have a question from Hamraj. I will allow you to talk. Hi, Hamraj. You can ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Actually, I am working for CSSI, and we are using Glassfish in our environment. It is Glassfish 3, and we just wanted to know, like, if we are moving to Payara, like Payara 5 or Payara 6, then first question is like, we are not in the cloud. So even though we are not in the cloud, would it be able to support our infrastructure without cloud, and keeping in mind, like, we may move into the cloud in near future? And second question is like, currently most of our code is in JDK 7. So is it possible, like, with new codes and with the existing code like this, Azure JDK will support the backward compatibility, which is the feature of Java. So is it still compatible, like if we are moving forward with JDK 8 or JDK 11? So kind of this thing.
Okay.
So there was like two questions indeed. One is like, is Java EE, Jakarta EE, still interested for people if they don't use cloud technologies. And the other one is how backwards compatible is the server still. Okay, so there's still quite a lot of things interesting if you don't use cloud. So like the more cloudy technology is basically a MicroProfile, and Jakarta has like a lot of other things in it that's quite usable for just standalone applications, for regular websites, even for on-premise things. Things like JSF are still like really suitable for internal applications. The entire security API is basically has very little to do with cloud. It's just how to secure your application server. Same goes for JPA. So JPA is not super cloudy. There's another spec coming, the NoSQL, that's perhaps a bit more aimed at cloud, at high scalability, at new types of the data stores. But basically, simply put, the answer is yes, there's still a lot of things interesting in Jakarta if you don't use clouds.
Yeah, and Payara works perfectly well on normal infrastructure. I think a lot of the work we've been doing is just to adapt it to also work well on cloud infrastructure, which has some limitations over and above normal infrastructure.
And what about the backward compatibility?
So obviously, if you're going to move from Glassfish 3, which is Java EE 7, no 6, I think, then there may be some small changes that you need to use your applications to make to your applications. In general, we've found that people can move applications quite easily. Jakarta and Java EE do have a lot of strong backward compatibility built in. Running applications compiled in Java 7 on Payara 5 shouldn't be a problem. So the Java 8 will run Java 7 applications pretty well. If you need to have a Java 7 application server, then Payara 4 still has supported versions on Java 7, but they require a support contract. When you move to JDK 11, that might get more tricky because JDK 11 is not necessarily backwardly compatible with old code. So there's things that you may have to do to change some APIs. Some APIs have disappeared and gone, and some of those might be used in your dependencies as well. So that's why we've taken why we've taken two-step approach of first getting our application to run on Java 11, and then secondly to get the whole server to be built against Java 11. So hope that answers the question.
Thanks. Yeah.
Cool, fantastic. We've got a few more questions now. So I'll just try to do these in order. Joe Hayes asks, how will Glassfish and Payara be developed in the future? Are all changes / fixes from Glassfish go into Payara and vice versa?
I'll take that. That's undecided at the moment. So obviously we are members of Jakarta EE and are part of the EE4J project. We will be doing some work on Glassfish to get it through to be Jakarta EE 8 certified. After that, it depends on really who is supporting Glassfish in Eclipse Foundation. So Payara, obviously our primary goal is Payara itself. We haven't fed up all the bug fixes in Payara into Glassfish, and we are quite different from Glassfish nowadays, from our source code tree, because we've been split off for about 4 years. If major bugs go into the Glassfish source, we tend to incorporate them into Payara. But after Glassfish 5.2, we'll still be around, and we'll still be working in Eclipse Foundation on lots of the major components that are in there. For example, Grizzly, HK2, JPA, Eclipse Link, and Yason. A lot of the implementations of the specifications are in Eclipse, and we'll be developing in there. What happens to our involvement in Glassfish core server itself will depend on involvement of others, I think.
Okay. And we have another question from Ivo Waltrin, and he asked, what is meant by native Spring support? What is different if it is treated as a first-class citizen with how it is now?
Okay, so I think that that difference really is that we are an application server. So what application servers do is they understand in great detail the component model of the applications that are being deployed, and then therefore can instrument and visualize what's happening in those applications. For example, in Payara, you can use the well probe and you can see a lot of what's happening with CDI beans, etc. So what we mean by first class citizen is basically being able to support Spring applications and understand them in a lot of detail. So a lot of what people do to get Spring working on a traditionally Java EE server is you have to wrap it in a WAR file, and you sort of use a lot of APIs that are embedded within the WAR itself, and a lot of those may clash with APIs and jars that are in Payara itself. So what we'll do is we'll basically take a deployment that strips down and doesn't use a lot of the sort of things that are built into the server for Java EE, but we'll use what's within the Spring application. So, and then have native knowledge of the beans within Spring itself, and allow them to be, allow visualization and request tracing and a lot of the monitoring and metrics to go through those as well. That's the vision. It's a long way off, but that's the sort of thing we're thinking.
Okay, we have another question from Edwin Amokwa. What are some of the features we should be expecting from the monitoring feature?
So currently for monitoring in Payara, we have quite a lot of capabilities. So we have health checks that check for memory usage, connection pool usage, thread usage, things like that. Currently what that does is just raises a notification and puts it out to one of the notifiers, which includes, by default, would be the log files. We also have built-in request tracing, where it basically puts markers into a request and will again notify you if a request exceeds a threshold. So for example, if an HTTP request exceeded, say, 3 seconds or some threshold that you set, then it will have captured what events occurred within that request to tell you why it took that length of time. Again, currently that's only gets logged out into the console as a log message in the log files. So what the monitoring console would be basically to give you lots of graphs, so you can monitor memory usage, thread usage, connection pool usage, etc., as well as visualizing request traces. So essentially taking the information we've built and just making it in a way that's a lot more visible than just seeing it within log files.
Okay. And Michael Ridlich, he has a question about Payara Platform 6 and JDK 11. I'm just going to put him live so he can ask his question. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you? Greetings from Hunterdon County, New Jersey. I just wanted to ask about the Payara Platform 6. And you mentioned JDK 11 plus. By the time 2021 comes along, JDK 14, which is a long-term support, will be around for almost a year. I don't know, is that enough time to consider incorporating JDK 14 and having Payara built on that as opposed to JDK 11?
Yeah, I think so, probably, because the biggest change, the biggest jump that we needed to take is from 8 to 9. Then from then on, the steps are smaller. So you would initially have to deal with the modular class path. You would have to deal with APIs disappearing, with some classes not usable anymore. When you have taken that step, the next steps from 11 to 12 and 12 to 13, we anticipate that they're going to be quite a bit easier to do.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues we've got actually is often not the code, it's the tool chain for testing a lot of the stuff. That's the bit we've had to make a lot of changes to get working on JDK 11. So once that's done, we should be good to go. And we've also, obviously, we're dependent on a lot of other projects to move their projects to JDK 11. So although everyone's done that big heave, if you like, we don't see moving to the latest LTS after that to be too much of a difficulty.
Great, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Michael. Okay, and we've got 2 more questions still. Another one from Joe Hayes. If both are standards-based, can I easily switch between Glassfish and Payara?
Yeah, that should be indeed the case. That's the entire idea behind standards, especially with Payara and Glassfish. They're using the same components, so that makes it a lot easier. They're using the same standards. So the simple answer is yes, you can do that.
Except for MicroProfile. So Glassfish doesn't support MicroProfile APIs at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good addition. So the MicroProfile APIs at the moment, they're not supported by Glassfish. They are supported by many of the other vendors. So you can still move your applications that use MicroProfile APIs and Jakarta APIs between those vendors. But if Glassfish is going to implement that, it does depend on other people as well.
Okay, and we have one last question, another one from Ivo Waltring. He asks, can you tell me a bit more about enhanced Docker support? In what areas are improvements or enhancement look for?
Okay, so there's a few really. One is that in Payara at the moment you have SSH nodes and decom nodes. And what we're going to introduce, I think in 19.2 roadmap, is a Docker node and a Kubernetes node. And what that will allow you to do would be to control and start and stop instances that are defined in Docker containers from the administration console, and be able to monitor them in the same way as you can normal instances. That's one of the things we're looking at. And combined with that is the ability on those nodes, the ability for the population of instances to increase and decrease. For example, in Kubernetes, if you had auto scaling on pods, then Payara server would see that and allow you and show you how many instances you have running, and you'll be able to look at the monitoring and things from the administration console. And another thing that's been asked for by customers is the ability to heartbeat. So one of the problems with JVMs in containers is that the JVM may not crash. It may just be sort of go zombie, if you like. And Payara will have monitoring capabilities in it, so that if it detects one of the containers or one of the instances in a container has gone zombie, then it will terminate the container, which would then kick off, say, Kubernetes to restart it. That's on the sort of in the sort of architectural level, technical architecture level. The other thing is just deeper integration with the abilities, like config maps to pull your certificates from Kubernetes, to publish into services for REST endpoints. Sort of those sort of more application level things and configuration things. We will just be able to take a lot of the capabilities that Kubernetes offers and use them within the server itself. So that's the enhancement that we're looking at. We're also, for customers, looking to give better support for a better container repository with lots of old versions and supported past versions and things like that. And we will revamp our open source images they seem to be, they're a bit of a second-class citizen at the minute. So we'll revamp those and make those, take on board a lot more ideas and make them better for the community.
Okay, brilliant. No new questions. I think that is everything. So brilliant. Thank you all very much for coming. And I'm glad you enjoyed the webinar.
Thanks very much.
All right, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Okay, cheers.
Bye, everyone.